Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at The Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
I'm Pete Wright, and I don't always get what I want either.
Today we're talking about Minute 18, which begins with the young spy and ends with global catastrophe. Back on the show, it's author Ryan Dalton. Hello again, Ryan.
Hey guys, happy to be back.
We are thrilled to have you. First off, I meant to talk about this in yesterday's minute, but I forgot. Calcutta, or Kolkata, as it is known now, this is where they are. And I guess in my childhood, I always remembered the city name Calcutta, and I did not, I guess I just missed the time when it transitioned. Did either of you, or were you aware that they had changed the city name from Calcutta to Kolkata?
I don't think I was, actually.
Did they actually change the name or just update the spelling?
Well, that's officially changing the name in whatever capacity you want.
Not for them, you know what I mean? It's not like Istanbul, Constantinople, right? Like
no, but it's like Mumbai, Bombay. It's like they're changing it from a bastardized, Anglicanized, I don't know if you can say that, way of them saying the city name to how they probably originally had it to begin with.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's pretty much everybody else is catching up to cultural norms.
Right. They're saying, the British have been gone for a while. Can we actually just call it what we used to call it?
What it is.
Yeah.
So it's like a guy that you call Steve, and after years, he's like, it's actually Steven. Could you call me Steven?
Right.
That's perfect. That's exactly how I see it in my head. I was not aware that that should be changed. I stand with Ryan.
Yes. 2001 is when the change happened. Went from Calcutta to Kolkata.
Kolkata.
Now you know. It is the capital of West Bengal.
Outstanding.
Fun facts.
Fun facts here on the show. All right, so this is the start of this conversation, of this minute, begins with Bruce asking Natasha, is she a spy too? They start that young, and of course Natasha says, I did. The history of Natasha Romanoff, we aren't going to get to really see any of this in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for quite some time. But right here, we get this brief little line that kind of gives us a sense of her character and her past. I find it to be an interesting way to say so much about her character without having to show a lot of her character. How do you two like the way that this part of this conversation is constructed?
I love it. I keep saying I love it about a lot of things, but I just love this movie. So everything, I love it. Perfect. But no, it's great. Again, this movie is a masterclass in economy of storytelling. Like as far as how long are we going to take to introduce you to a character? What little subtle things are we going to do to not only let you get to know them, but also suggest, hey, there's a deeper character and a deeper history here, enough so that you can get into it and enjoy it and be curious. But it's not so little that it feels like a dangling thread. It's just like, that was, I think, beautifully done, where it's like, okay, it suggests something, but they move on from it. It's not like it's an unclosed loop. It's just an interesting thing that you're like, oh, I hope we learn more about that later. So yeah, I thought it was really well done.
What about you, Pete?
Yeah, I do too. I love it because, as much as for years I've been saying how much I wanted a Black Widow movie, and I feel like my prayers were answered, and it was fine. I think I really wanted a Black Widow movie back at this point in the MCU, but with the gift of hindsight, I actually like the mystery a lot in this movie. Like, it would have been really different had we already seen an origin story of Black Widow and her youth and, being in that program. And, I think it's, as Ryan, as you say, like the economy of story, the economy of her mystery is, I think, really great. And I do like the idea of the handoff between these two people, between Black Widow and this little girl who's running through the house as a potential spy. The idea that she is a young, SHIELD agent slays me. I think it's fantastic.
And the way that Scarlett Johansson even delivers that little line that I did.
Yeah.
I think was really well done, because it could be very easy for that line to feel really flat and really wooden and just kind of recited. But she put a lot of meaning into that. And so I think her performance added a lot of depth.
Yeah, a lot of depth, a lot of sadness too. Like, as much as she's just clearly saying, yeah, this is who I am, she's also, there's mourning in terms of what she lost.
There's certain like tragedy years later, you just kind of take it for granted that it was horrible.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing you hear in her voice, that it's there, but it's, that's just life.
Yeah, right. And probably some glee that now this little girl has to go through the same thing she went through.
That's dark, man.
Stick it to her.
Really dark.
Just kidding. What I think is interesting about Natasha is as a character coming from the comics, her in the comics, she kind of started as this villain character. And so it's interesting that she basically has been wrapped in so much more as intrinsically a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent up to this point. She knows more heroes at this point than anyone else. I mean, she met Tony in Iron Man 2. Obviously, she and Hawkeye have a history together. And so, like, she is a bigger part of this story up to this point than really any of the other Avengers. And I find that to be really interesting, that she kind of has been brought in as this kind of tie, this connection to help bring them together. I find that really interesting with her character.
Yeah, good point. And different histories, too. Like, I love how Stark doesn't trust her, and she knows that just based on what happened before. And that's another way where it does a good job of leveraging what we've already had. And when, you get the callback later on of her, in a different part of the movie when she says, Stark not trusting her, that's a fun thing. Like, oh, yeah, in Iron Man 2, that this and that happened. And so just another way this movie does a great job of showing you new stuff, but also leveraging what came before.
Yeah, right. Now, she brings up S.H.I.E.L.D., this whole idea, in the course of their conversation, that she's not here to kill him. She is here on behalf of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he recognizes the name, and that made me wonder, they never really brought up S.H.I.E.L.D. at all. I mean, I don't think that they had the rights, honestly, with Universal to talk about S.H.I.E.L.D. when they made The Incredible Hulk. There might have been markings on a case at some point, but if so, it was subtle. I can't recall specifically, but really, I mean, Ross never specifically talks about S.H.I.E.L.D., unless I'm forgetting something. Is there ever a mention of S.H.I.E.L.D. in The Incredible Hulk?
Not that I'm recalling. You're right. There may have been something on a case. Like, I'm wondering if, like, when they went to get the serum for Blonsky, if there was something on the case or something. But you may be right about, like, just not having the rights to it. But then in this movie, in another scene, they sort of cover it when they're talking about Banner doing the experiments, trying to reproduce the super soldier. Yeah, if that's how they're telling us now, okay, that's how he became Hulk, you could think, okay, well, obviously they're going to tell him that it's a S.H.I.E.L.D. operation, trying to recreate the serum. So they do make a little bit of a leap there. But I think they just kind of trust you to make the leap with them. Yeah,
I guess so. And I mean, they did have the Marvel one-shot, The Consultant, where you do have kind of a S.H.I.E.L.D. connection with Tony talking to General Ross. So it kind of gives you this sense that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been around, and probably because Bruce was involved in those experiments with Ross, that he probably has heard of S.H.I.E.L.D. I did think it was interesting, though, that it was just something that's brought up. It's like some secret spy organization that I would imagine, like, your average everyday Joe in this world doesn't know what S.H.I.E.L.D. is, right? I mean, or do you think?
Not yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, by now, I mean, I guess, yes, they will know what S.H.I.E.L.D. is, but the movies just in general don't make a big deal about the introduction of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? Like, eventually helicarriers are falling out of the sky, and nobody's making a huge deal about the fact that we just didn't know what S.H.I.E.L.D. was until pretty recently. I think that's actually interesting.
Maybe the typical person just kind of sees it as another government agency. Maybe there's a more public face to it. And, well, even in the first Iron Man, they're not even calling it S.H.I.E.L.D. yet.
They don't even know what it is.
Well, they technically are. They just, for some reason, haven't quite figured out that it actually, the acronym spells S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
But it's really
imagine how wonderful that moment is. Like, you guys, it spells something. Practically an acrostic.
It actually makes me think of in the comics when Sword came around, someone made a joke about like how many different words are you guys going to turn into like government acronyms?
Right. Yeah, let's see. Spear. What else can we use? Let's come up with something else. It needs to have this sort of connotation. So, yeah. Always
Right.
so funny.
So awesome.
She does bring up Nick Fury also to him, and this idea that Nick Fury seems to trust you. And I found that to be interesting. And I want to know, like, what is our sense as to why? Like, what is it about Nick Fury or what is it about Bruce, I suppose, that at least gives this sense that Nick trusts him? Do you have any idea as to, like, why Nick sees Bruce as somebody that he should bring in? I mean, the whole thing with the consultant was they were going to bring Blonsky in specifically. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I find this really interesting because obviously the consultant also is kind of setting that up. Like, oh, we don't want Abomination. We would rather have Hulk between the two. I mean, obviously it's a comic book. Hulk is the kind of the character, but I'm curious as to, what is it about him that makes Nick trust him?
That makes Nick trust Hulk.
Trust Hulk /
Trust
Bruce.
Bruce.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, isn't it just straight up the shoehorned gamma thing?
Well, is it? I mean, is that what, maybe there's certainly that, but I don't know. I find it so strange that Nick, like, because then it seems like it seems like they would script it. Nick Fury, seems to feel you're an important part of this team because of what you're capable of.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of trust when it comes to Bruce. I mean, is there something about the portrayal of Hulk through the Incredible Hulk film that makes it seem like, oh, maybe even though he turns into this big rage monster, he still is somehow trying to save people? Or I don't know. It just seems like a strange approach to take with the character.
I wonder if it's a couple of things. It could be a few things. Whenever hypotheticals come up, I always think in terms of, okay, if I was going to write the backstory here, what would I do? There's possibilities. It could be that if you go from a couple of different spy aspects, it could be that Fury has sort of, with his spy skills, evaluated what type of person Banner is and knows that he's the kind of person they can go to. The other colder half of the spy part could be that he knows that Banner already has exposure to a lot of the information about what S.H.I.E.L.D. is up to, and so there's less exposure if they just go to Banner again than to try to bring in some of their new scientists to do it. It could be that he knows that Banner's on the run anyway, so there's not much really damage he can do to S.H.I.E.L.D. or to their reputation. It could be that, again, it's just guesses because they don't really say, but
sure.
Or it could be another thing with Natasha, another way for her to kind of woo him to her side, and to feel like maybe it's like, okay, if you feel trusted, maybe you'll be more likely to come with me. Yeah, it could really be any of those. I guess it depends on who's writing it.
Yeah.
Well, and to a certain extent, it could be all of them. Like there is an element to all of those that does make sense. And so and there's obviously no right or wrong. It's just, it's a scripted line, but it was one that made me go, I wonder what it is that draws Nick to wanting this character to be around. And I mean, Pete, to your point, the whole gamma thing obviously is becoming a huge part of this. And so, and very specifically why they want him at this moment. So, I do think it is an interesting line for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again one of those things that is very economical in suggesting history, but not leaving a huge dangling thread that you're going to be wondering about.
Yeah, right.
Except on podcasts.
Except on podcasts years later, right?
One
exactly.
minute at a time.
Here it is. I also love the line, the whole idea of ever being approached with, we need you to come in. Like, I just cannot imagine. I just watched episode 2 of The Last of Us on HBO. And without spoiling anything, I mean, it starts with a scene. It's kind of a flashback scene setting us up with this scientist in Jakarta who is brought in, and these people show up and say, we need you to come help us. And she basically has to kind of like go with them and drop everything. And I find that to be such an odd request and kind of a frightening request to ever potentially be in a place in my life where I know so much about one particular thing that if the government needed it to like, explore some possible thing that was about to happen, that they might make me drop everything and make them come with them. I don't know how I feel about that.
Andy, you have produced 370,000 movie by minute episodes. And now the government wants to get into it. We need you and only you. And we need you in a secure location today. Yeah, it could happen.
There it is.
Can you break down the Cold War minute by minute? We really need,
page by page. Oh God!
Oh dear!
What a nightmare. But I love that idea, and then of course it always follows with the "what if I say no" response, and I just the way that it plays, like we need you to come in. What if I say no? I'll persuade you. Like all of it feels so scripted. It feels like exactly what you would expect in the way like this sort of scenario plays out. But I can't help but enjoying it because of these two performers. Like I feel like they carry the weight of this and some of the writtenness of the lines, if I can say that. Like it just feels that way, but I just love watching them do it. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah. Well, a good actor can take a B+ or B- line and make it an A+ line.
Yeah.
And even when she says, I'll persuade you, the way she does it with a little bit of a smirk, it's kind of like, come on, we both know this is why I'm here, to persuade you to do this. They take lines that are a little bit rote, and again, could be kind of wooden and make them fun and interesting.
Yeah, right. And then we get, this is really the first time that we're talking about the other guy, the Hulk, right? And I found it interesting because he says, what if the other guy says no? Mm-hmm. You're a big fan of Hulk and you've probably read a lot of the comics with him. How much control does Hulk, as kind of the alter ego, have in a decision like this, if any? Like, I found it to be an interesting way to kind of bring Hulk into the conversation.
Yeah, boy, my first answer may not be totally satisfying. It really depends on who's writing him, and how much of a push and pull they want there to be between Banner and Hulk. And sometimes in the course of the comics, he's in a position kind of mentally or in his life where he has, more control. And there's other times when the Hulk, like during the whole Planet Hulk series, Hulk was in pretty much total control.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it really goes back and forth, and there's kind of every flavor in between. I think probably the baseline is that, Banner has some control, but when it comes to any form of being threatened, is what kind of, Hulk kind of wakes up, I think, at that point and is like, wait, this concerns both of us. So, yeah, I think, it's just really like in your scene and for the character, what kind of balance do you need for the story you're telling?
We've gone back and forth on this a little bit. And part of it is because some of the later Hulks, like the She-Hulk, which I loved She-Hulk, but some of the later Banner Hulks, the Professor Hulk stuff, it's fine. But what's really great about this character for me personally is the Jekyll and Hyde-ness of it. It's the risk that he carries around all the time. And as soon as you absolve him of that risk, of that fear that he carries around of hurting others because of who he is, because of his core identity, I lose a little bit. I think the character loses a little bit of its power and intensity. He's just now a utility player for science and strength and no longer carries the risk that is central to this character. And to your point about, it depends on who's writing him. I think that's a great point. I think there are people who have written Professor Hulk well. And I also still prefer, like, the reason I came to Hulk, the reason I like Hulk is that I like the duality of the character. And I don't think it exists as well without the duality of the character.
I definitely get that because, yeah, you're sacrificing some stakes.
Right.
Yeah. And if there are fewer stakes, then there's, less tension and, it can feel less interesting. So, yeah, if you had to make like a Professor Hulk movie, you'd have to find another way to reintroduce stakes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would fall very flat. And yeah, I'll be curious, what they try to do going on into the future. Like, I have a guess. The fact that they've recast General Ross makes me wonder if they're bringing in Red Hulk, because I think otherwise, if you're not going to do something like that, you could easily leave that character behind. There was a thing in the comics recently, at least I think it was recent, at least I just learned about it, where Hulk discovered that he has a Hulk. So
Oh, wow.
there's a point where I guess he can get mad enough where he becomes a different, like there's another Hulk inside of him that's even bigger and worse.
Oh my goodness.
Which, if you do it wrong, could be real cheesy, but I haven't actually read that
Russian nesting doll.
Wait till you meet Hulk's friend, other Hulk.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, I'm looking at a picture of it right now. The Hulk's Hulk Clue. K-L-U-H. Hulk backwards. That's amazing.
So, and I haven't read that, so I don't know if it's well done or not. But anyway, what my whole point was, I agree. There's a lot of interesting things you can do, but at the same time, that classic Banner versus Hulk thing is classic for a reason.
Yeah. Do you like how Hulk has shifted over the course of the films from this point? Well, I mean, I guess from Edward Norton's Hulk, but really, as far as the Ruffalo run, from this Hulk who feels a little more dangerous down the line. Like, what are your thoughts?
I think the dangerous one is really compelling. I like that, though. I think it's interesting for a superhero team to have someone on the team that may, if the wrong thing happens, try to turn and kill them too. That to me seems very on brand for how crazy this world is, and just the even crazy idea of a superhero team kind of being on the ragged edge like that. I like that. I do think that in the recent movies, I always like his performance, but I do feel like the character feels very safe now, and he's sort of a little bit swallowed up by the kind of the ensemble-ness of everything. I do think that's just, if you're got a huge shared universe, that's going to happen to some. So, but yeah, I like the early version. I find this really compelling.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, though, as we're talking about the stakes. Like, even after this sequence, and there's a little bit of talk about the risk that we'll talk about later, the big battle, it's already pretty absolved of stakes against the internal stakes, right? Like, we've already sort of moved on.
That's true. He's kind of aimed himself at the bad guy, and yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they've kind of funneled that by that point.
Yep.
There is a line here. Natasha says, "You've been more than a year without an incident." Just looking at the timeline, March 18th, 2011 was his last incident, and that was the last film. And then, according to the wiki, after managing to refrain from having an incident during his 8.5 months of travel from British Columbia after he leaves Harlem, Bruce Banner crosses the Pakistani border into India. He is attacked by local bandits and turns into the Hulk. So I guess that's the March 18th, 2011 incident right there. And he's been fine in India since then. No incidents to report. So.
And that's another line that was a great way to demonstrate that S.H.I.E.L.D. has always had an eye on him, even if they've not interfered until they needed him.
Yeah. And another little nice line here that I think it's touching. It says a lot about the character. Maybe a little on the nose, but I still like the way it plays when he says, "I don't every time get what I want." Weirdly worded, but the message is nice as he notices that baby swing there and kind of nudges it. I think it's a nice moment, and maybe it's nice because the way Mark Ruffalo plays it. It is a little on the nose, but I do find that to be something that says a lot about this particular character.
Because the Hulk eats babies and doesn't often get to eat babies. That's what you're saying, right?
They're the source of his power, right?
Yeah, babies are the source of his power. I get it. I mean, I just want to make sure the audience gets what you were suggesting.
It's a great nod to classic baby-eating Hulk.
Classic baby-eating Hulk. That's Earth 617, right? I'm sure that's what it was. Yeah.
They don't talk about that Hulk as much. Yeah,
weird that he's not brought up in conversation more.
But yeah, I did think that was interesting. Now, I thought I had read this could either be, I don't know if this was them rewriting history a little bit, but I had read a thing that, like, in the set dressing and everything, they put that little crib in there as just a piece of set dressing. And then from what I read, when he gives that line, he chose to go over and sort of touch the the crib, but that wasn't planned. He just kind of used the thing that was there on set, but it ended up adding a lot of meaning to that line when he's looking at the crib, and a little bit like a little suggestion of there, like, oh yeah, he would have wanted a family. Whether that was truly an accident and he took advantage of it, or whether it was planned, it was a good moment.
Yeah, really is. We get a little talk about Natasha shifts gears here to really start focusing the conversation, talking about this potential global catastrophe. And that is the end of our minute. Any last thoughts from either of you about anything in this minute?
Boy, I just have fun with this whole scene. And I love those two characters together. I love scenes with characters together for the first time. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about these couple of minutes, is just I think they're so much fun.
Well, we are thrilled to have had you in this conversation this week. We'll be shifting to another guest tomorrow, but you will be back next week to talk a little bit of Steve Rogers and a little bit of Tony Stark. It should be fun.
Oh, yes.
We're very much looking
forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we head off today, remind everybody again about your books.
Yeah, so my first series was the Time Shift trilogy, series of time travel mysteries. My latest novel is called This Last Adventure. You can find all of them on Amazon. This Last Adventure is the newer one, so you can find that on bookstore shelves, or if they don't have it on the shelf, they can order it for you just anywhere that you like to buy books.
Fantastic. Check those books out, everybody. They are a fun read. You'll find them links to them in the show notes on your podcatchers, or our website, marvelmovieminute.com, where you can learn more about the show and our membership. And that's it. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about Minute 19. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Andy, tomorrow, will the Hulk eat any more babies?
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.